Welcome to Sisters in Crime Australia and Murder Monday, when authors talk about their crime craft. I'm Karina Kilmore, a crime writer, a journalist, and a member of Sisters in Crime Australia. And we've been celebrating women's crime writing since 1991. Before I introduce Hayley Young, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hello, welcome Hayley.
Hello.
Big congratulations for winning the 2021 Scarlet Stiletto Trophy for your short story, Monster Hunters. Your story not only took out the first prize worth $1,500, but also won the ScriptWorks Award for a great film idea worth $500. This year's Scarlet Stiletto Awards, the 28th annual competition for short stories written by Australian women, had 241 entries competing for almost $12,000 in prizes. So your wins are great achievements in such a large field. You're a pharmacist by trade and by day and have only been writing fiction for a year. But in that brief time, you've been shortlisted for 5 competitions, the 2020 Hammond House International Literary Prize, a UK flash fiction competition, and in 3 anthologies by Stringy Bark Publishing. You write across genres, and Monster Hunter is your first stab at crime. Before we start the questions, can you please give us the elevator pitch for Monster Hunters?
Yes, thank you. It's wonderful to be here, and obviously congratulations to all the other authors as well. Monster Hunters is set in a rural outback Australian town, which is in the grip of an escalating drug crisis, and centred around our protagonist Sprig, Superintendent Sprig Collins, who with her team has to work to uncover the mastermind at the centre of the drug ring, while she tries to determine how far she's willing to go to protect her town.
Fabulous. Okay, well, let's get to our questions. How many drafts did you do before entering your story?
I probably did about 3 serious drafts and then about 50 edits. I sort of stopped counting with the editing. That just keeps going and going.
What's your top writing tip?
My top writing tip is find time or make time. I think a lot of people who do short stories and who obviously longer writing understand that it takes a lot of time to do any part of the process. So for people who want to do that, I think that giving up things like one more episode of Netflix or maybe getting up 20 minutes earlier to do some writing, you really have to make the time or find the time in your day to do it. And then you'll get a lot done.
Yeah. And what's your top self-editing tip now you're an expert?
If you're not ready to throw your laptop out the window, you haven't edited it enough. You can still do some more work on it.
What started you on a life of crime? This is your first venture into crime writing.
It is. So safe to say the Scarlet Stiletto Awards and Sisters in Crime started me on my life of crime. And now I've started it, I'd like to keep going. It's been a lot of fun. It's been a lot
Fantastic.
of fun so far.
Do you, when you're writing, do you start with plot or character or something else?
Partially character. It usually starts with an idea or a conversation from a character. I definitely do not start with plot. There is not a lot of plot in this writer's mind. It comes together at the end when I have to go back and make it look like I knew what was happening while it was happening. But always with characters or parts of characters, and then that gets built on as I go.
Well, that leads straight into, are you a plotter or a pantser?
A pantser through and through. Chaotic pantser. I'm often as surprised by my stories as hopefully readers are. And as I said, I start out with something very small and I just let it go where it's going to take me and learn about the characters as they are willing to reveal themselves. And then at the end, I have to try and tie it all together and make it look like it was on purpose.
Why is crime such an appealing genre?
I think people like crime. There's something I think quite thrilling about exploring those darker parts of humanity and those uncomfortable topics, but doing it from a safe place. So you're in your home with your cup of tea and your book and you're safe, but you can dabble in those kind of more dangerous areas. And I think from a reader and from a writing perspective as well, that's what's really special about crime.
Yeah. And actually, did you read a lot of crime, Hayley, or not a big
I read a lot of genres. I wouldn't say crime is probably my top one, but I do read a bit of crime and I always enjoy it. I especially like the few Australian crime books that I've read recently. So
yeah,
yes.
fabulous. What's the hardest thing about writing?
I think patience, as someone who doesn't have a lot of it in other areas of life. No part of the process is quick. You have to be patient with it. You have to take your time at every step of the process with the coming up with the ideas, with the editing, with getting it right. And I think you have to learn to be okay with it taking a lot of time to polish it.
Yeah, yeah. What triggers you to write about a particular story?
Ideas kind of hit me. Often it's something triggered by music or a conversation I overhear, or it can sort of come out of anywhere. And it does start with something very vague, usually that might end up being quite a small part of the story. But I think part of being a writer is recognizing that there is that inspiration all around you and just keeping an eye out for it.
Yeah, lovely. Who's your favourite crime fiction character?
Be very hard to narrow it down to a character, but I can't go past a strong female protagonist with a bit of moral ambiguity. So
there's plenty of those out there.
Anyone in that category I'm a fan of. I like people with a bit of a troubled past.
Yeah.
Kind of an anti-hero sometimes. Yeah.
Fantastic. How important is place or setting in your writing?
Extremely important. I think especially if readers can connect with a place, if that can come to life in their mind. And it's hard to do in short stories because you don't have a lot of words to have that setting. So to have it somewhere people can immediately feel familiar with or comfortable with, I think is a really critical part of pulling off a short story.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are your writing inspirations?
I'm a very big Jane Harper fan. I also, there's a Tasmanian author called Kyle Perry who writes some very good Australian mysteries as well, who I really like.
Tasmanian writer?
Yes, yeah, that's right. So they're probably my two big Australian ones, particularly in this genre. But there's a lot of wonderful indie Australian authors out there as well, which I think is a area that could really do with some support too. There's some incredible people out there, very talented.
Yeah, no, absolutely. What research did you do for your winning short story?
I know not a lot about the police force and rankings and all of that sort of thing. So I had to do a little bit of that, research into that. I grew up in not a completely rural town, but a more country town. So a lot of the setting and that kind of interaction with the community came a bit more naturally. But in terms of how the police would operate and things like that, didn't know much about that. So that was probably the main research I had to do for this story.
Yep. What is the hardest thing you've ever had to write about out of any of your writing?
Oh, that's tough. I think that grief is always a very tough thing to write because we've all felt that in some level. And I think to write it well, you have to tap into that. So you have to revisit some pretty uncomfortable emotions sometimes. And I think a lot of people will cry when they write sad things. And I'm certainly one of them. And I think that's always very, very tough to look back into and try and describe how that feels. And everyone has felt that at some point. So it's important to include it, but it can be tough to revisit those feelings for sure.
Yeah. What is your writing routine, or do you even have one, being a pharmacist during the day?
Yes, it happens at night, usually night and weekends. It doesn't, I do try to write every day. It doesn't feel right now to not write something, or at least edit something, work on something every day. So generally, I'm very lucky to have a supportive husband. So once work's done, once, you know, all the jobs are done, when I get home, I usually have a couple of hours each night that I can dedicate to writing. So I don't do a lot of other stuff. I've given up a lot of Netflix watching and things like that, but it's worth it to have that extra time to write.
Yeah, lovely. How do you represent diversity in your writing?
I think that's very important. I hope that diversity comes somewhat naturally into a lot of my stories, because I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by a lot of wonderful and diverse people in my life. So I hope that some of it finds its way in naturally. One thing I do deliberately often do, particularly in short stories, is I don't describe any physical characteristics of my characters, because I would like for anybody to pick up that story and be able to see themselves in that character. They don't have a certain color hair or a certain background a lot of the time. So I hope that that gives anyone who picks that up the ability to see themselves and their family in those stories. That being said, I think that moving forward, it's really important to listen to the stories around us. And I think maybe further collaboration and promotion of diverse writers would be really important. It's something we should all be working towards.
Absolutely. How do you write about violence?
Sometimes it's difficult. I think a lot of imagination goes into it. And I think you sort of have to take it with a grain of salt. You have to separate some things out, obviously, because they are quite difficult to write about. So after I write, if I ever write anything particularly violent or full on, it's always nice to sort of step back and do something a little bit less intense with the writing. So a nice scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you just have to try and separate it a little bit.
Do you write in chronological order or swap between chapters and scenes?
There is absolutely no order. Not chronological, not any kind of order. It's in, you know, bursts here and there, and things get rearranged and deleted and brought to the beginning and brought to the end and rearranged again a million times. And yeah, there is no method. It comes together. My editing stage is quite long because it takes a lot of time to sort through all the brain explosions I've had along the way.
That's lovely. And our last question for tonight, Hayley, how would you get away with murder?
I am a terrible liar and have a terrible poker face. So in real life, I don't think I would. I think the only way I'm getting away with murder is to keep it in my fiction.
Yeah. Best place for it.
Yes, a lot cleaner.
Hayley, thank you for being with us today on Murder Monday, and congratulations again, our 2021 Scarlet Stiletto Award winner.
Thank you so much.